The very first answer that we can see on the screen is what, where, how, when. So this is the very first chapter. So let's begin. So the very first question is what can we know about the past? So if you are thinking, just pause for a moment and give it a quick shot in your mind that what are all the things that you can think about the past and you can and you think that you can actually know about all those past. So this chapter is all about what we can know about the past and the all the question about where, how, and when. So these all questions are going to be solved in this particular chapter. So we can know about what people ate, their eating habits. We can know that what were the food items uh, they ate and how they conducted themselves in terms of their clothing, how they used to live, where they used to live, what they used to do to sustain their living, to earn or uh, to remain in their livelihood, and what used to children play. Okay, today we have lots of toys out there into the market. So what kind of toys do the children back then 1,000 years ago or 1,200 years ago or 8,000 years ago, what what did children play in the past, and what kind of song or music did they play or they compose? So we can know all of these about the past. Okay, now, can we know where did people live? Yes, of course, we can know where did people live. So this is a particular map over here about the hills and the rivers. You can go through it, just go through it one by one. Take a quick snapshot in your brain. Where are all the hills and the rivers located? Don't try to learn on one in one go, but just have a look at it, and after that, let's begin. River Narmada. So people lived for 1,000 years. Can you locate where River Narmada is from the map? So please try to locate where River Narmada is. So it is said that it is found that people lived around the banks of the River Narmada about 1,000 years ago. Just like that, we are living in certain kind of a city or a state. Okay, uh, so back then people used to live along the banks of the river. Okay, and people lived in Narmada for thousands of years. What they used to do? Okay, so they were skilled gatherers. Okay, and whatever they did, they were skilled. If we are adding the word skilled, so they knew what they were doing. They had a vast knowledge of the forest plants. They knew about the roots, so they used to collect roots, fruits, and other forest produce as well. So they knew what kind of a fruit is edible or not, what is poisonous or not. So they had knowledge because they were skilled in gathering these forest produce. Okay. So another, they were also found to be animal hunters as well. Okay. So what kind of an animal they hunted, we would come to know that what were all animals there. Okay. So first of all, you need to know what all they are doing to sustain or to remain there in their livelihood. First, we came to know that they were gatherers. Secondly, we know from the evidence there that they were animal hunters as well. Okay. Now, if you could locate from the map Suleiman and Qatar Hill, okay. So here is Suleiman and Qatar Hill. If you could see, here is Suleiman and here is Qatar Hill. So in this very region, the very first time the beginning of the crops started to be grown. Okay. And this was used to be done by both the men and the women. It was not that only men were going outside and doing the stuff. Obviously, they were doing outside stuff in terms of hunting animal, but collectively they are growing the crops. Okay. In which particular region it is mentioned? Suleiman and Kirtar. Okay. Now, we said that the crops were grown. So, what kind of crops were grown? About 8,000 years ago, the crops such as wheat and barley were grown. Okay, Thirdly, they also reared animals. Okay, animals such as sheep, goat, and cattle. And 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 this whole location is in village. Okay, so there is a kind of a village setup. People are living in a village setup. Okay, so there is no evidence of cities or urban habitation uh, that would be found in terms of evidence. Okay, um, in the date frame or in the time frame that we are talking about, particularly right now. All right. So your task is to find the river Narmada, locate it. Okay, comment down below in which region, southern, eastern, northern, or wherever you are finding it. Let me. All right. So moving ahead. So the first time agricultural developed in the northeastern and central India. So we have seen that the crops were being grown, okay, and the very first crops were wheat and barley. Keep remembering, all right. Very first crop were wheat and barley, all right. So, and the first time agriculture developed in which region? In the northeastern region. So this is our north, this is our east, okay, northeastern region, and this is our central India. So here the agriculture started. And the first ever rice grown was grown to the north of India. We know about wheat and barley. Where wheat and barley was grown, wheat and barley was grown around the Suleiman and the Kesares. So in this region, all right. And our rice was grown is to the north of the Vindhyas. See, Vindhyas is this and north to the Vindhyas. So here rice was grown. Okay, and 4,700 years ago, earlier cities developed. In the previous slide, we saw that in this time frame, people were living in the village, but around 4,700 years ago, we are seeing that cities started to emerge and earliest of the cities started to develop. All right, and all these cities flourished on the river Indus. So here is our Indus River. Indus River has its tributaries as well. So what are tributaries? Tributaries are basically um, just there is one large river that is Indus, and it has its own smaller parts of river. So these smaller parts of river are called the tributaries. All right. So 2,500 years ago, cities were developing around the banks of the Gangas and its tributaries and along the sea coast. Okay. And do you know what Ganga and its tributaries are called? So there is a particular name of Ganga and its tributaries. They are called the Son. Now, area along the river to the south was known as the Magadh Kingdom. So in this region of the south, you could find in the earliest of time there was Magadh Kingdom. There were also many kingdoms were existing back then, okay, in different places. To the southern region there was Magadh Kingdom, and it was very big kingdom, very huge kingdom. Today, if you want to know that where it is located, so presently the it is in Bihar. All right. Now, people used to also travel from one place to another, okay, from one subcontinent to other. People used to climb mountains. People used to move to deserts, rivers, and seas. And obviously, it was difficult, but people used to do it. Why? Because there was a reason attached to it why they were doing it. They were doing it in search of livelihood. They were doing it to escape the natural disasters. They were doing it so they can go to others' land and conquer the land. They were doing for trade. They were doing to spread the belief system so that people can know how to conduct themselves and how to live their life. Okay, just do a comparative study how we are living today and how it is very similar the way people are living back then. Because today, if you will see, um, today also people are moving from one place to another in terms of their job, in, to find the job, okay, to you know enhance their way of living, okay. And also in India, there are certain regions which are very disaster prone. Okay, and a huge amount of displacement takes place whenever the disaster hit. So people, in order to escape that disaster, people used to move from one place to another. Okay, And back then, since there were kings and queens, in order to expand their land, they used to conquer others' land. Today, between Russia and Ukraine is going on. It is all the activity because of the land. All right. And people also used to go for trade as well. Merchants were there. They used to carry their caravans along the seas and do the trade. All right. And we also do trade. There are international trades between India and so many other countries. We buy from them. They do take things from us. So trade used to happen. And today also people from the religious backgrounds, from different religious communities, they go and they preach people. Okay, so it is very much similar. Okay, so if you do the comparative analysis. And also, there were people back then also who used to move from one place to another uh, for for the sake of adventure. Like just like today, people go to hills, Manali and trip to Goa and to climb mountains, you know, so that they can explore and they can do adventurous stuff. Okay, your next task is to find the Garo Hills. Find the Garo Hills, locate it, and mention in the comment down below. All right. So moving ahead. So what is all this happening? When people are moving from one place to another, obviously people are meeting one with one another. Okay. And when you meet one another, obviously you share something. What you are sharing is your ideas. What you are sharing is your belief system. What you are sharing is how you maybe cook food. What you're sharing is maybe your music playlist, just like we do today. Okay. When we are with our friends and our friends does not belong to one certain community, okay, from different backgrounds we make friends. We may sometimes go abroad for studies, and there the cultural diversity is altogether different. Okay, so you come to know about their culture and about their tradition, about the kind of food they eat, about the kind of music they play, about their clothing. So there is everything is different. So what is happening back then also, when people came together, they learned new ways of carving stones, because people used to take help from stone to burn or to cook their food. Okay, and they also learned about composing music and even cooking food. They shared ideas about the cooking, about how they can cook food differently, what all spices they can add, maybe. Okay, so all this is adding up to enriching the cultural tradition. So, so this was the the very thing that was happening. All right, moving now, coming to the names of the land. Today, we call India with how many names? We call it India, we call it Bharat, we call it Hindustan. All right. So back then, so today we are referring, when we are calling India, Bharat, or Hindustan, it is we are referring it as in the terms of in term of country. Okay. So the question is, back then, when people are using the word or were using the word India and Bharat, were heading towards a country, or it was a different thing for them? So let's see. So India actually comes from the word. Sorry, not India. There is a Sanskrit word in there is a Sanskrit word called Sindhu. Okay, and from this particular word, the word Indus came into existence. As you can remember, in the previous slide, we were looking at the river Indus and its tributaries, right? So this Indus came from a Sanskrit word called Sindhu. So what happened? 2,500 years ago, Iranians and Greeks, they came in India through the northwest frontier. Okay, through this region they came, through the northwest frontier. All right, and since Indus River is here only in the northwestern frontier, and they came from here, so they knew the name Indus, and they gave it another name for their own convenience called Hindus or Indo. All right, and they and to segregate or to create a kind of a differentiation, or and for their convenience to understand the part of the land, um, the northwestern frontier region, they called it as Hindus or Indos, and the whole east of the river of the land they called it India. Okay, okay, all right. Now come to Bharat. Now this particular term Bharat is being mentioned in Rig Veda, the very first composition, 3,500 years ago. It was mentioned in Rig Veda, the term. And this term was being particularly used for a group of people who are living in a particular location that is, who lived in northwestern region. So for them, they were called the Bharatas, or the people who are living in northwestern region. But for now, we know that we use all these terms for our country. All right. Now moving ahead. So we can, so just a quick snapshot, we can know about the past, about their eating habits, about their clothing, about their housing patterns, about their occupation, what all they did. Okay. And they were hunter gatherers. They used to rear sheep, and they were the travelers. Now, what more can we find about the past, and from where we can find about the past? Okay, so there are manuscripts, there are inscriptions. So this is a manuscript. So what manu in itself means? Manu in itself means handwritten. It is something that is handwritten. So can you think that if we are using the word handwritten, so where they used to write? Because back then, do you think 1,000 years ago, or 8,000 years ago, there was paper or something like that? No, obviously. Paper came into existence after Industrial Revolution. So where they are writing all this, and how they are preserving all this, and how do we get to see all these things today? So let's read more about all. So they used to write on palm, okay, or the birch, that is the bark of a tree. And now over years it got destroyed. Obviously, if you are writing something on the palm leaf or the bark of the tree, it is going to be destroyed, obviously a long time has been passed, and so they were eaten away by insects. But not all of them has not been damaged or destroyed. There are some that have survived, and they are being preserved in the temples and the monasteries. All right. Now, what kind of books or what kind of things that they were writing? Okay, because today in the world, if you see, there are various areas in which the things are being written. There are sports, there are political issues, there are movies in which the things are being written, there are geopolitical issues. So there are various areas in which the things are being written today. So they were writing about the religious beliefs and the practices. All right, they were writing about the lives of the kings as well. Because if you see, there are lots of documentaries about the previous rulers. So how do you think that we know about all these rulers, that what they did and how they won did they won the battle or not? So we come to know about all these things because these things have been written, and from these sources we can carve out the information, and that is how we do. All right. And the things about medicines and sciences were also written. Epics were being written. We have two very epics, Mahabharata and Ramayana, very popular epics in India. Okay. We have poems, we have plays, and now the so in what language it used to be written? It was written in Sanskrit and Prakrit. So Prakrit actually was a language that was majorly used by the common people, and Sanskrit was used by majorly Brahmins, or the upper class people, upper caste of people. All right. Now coming to the inscription. So here it is an inscription that is shown as the film. So inscription is something again that is written, but not on palm leaf or bark of a tree, but on something of a hard surface. Okay, that is stone or metal. So why it was used? It was used by the kings as well. It was used by the commoners as well. The king used it at the time, maybe if they want to instruct something and they it in the in the public domain, so that their subjects can know about it. So they will just inscribe the orders over there, and the subjects would get to know, okay, these are the things that we have to obey. All right. And also, if there is any kind of a battle or war has happened, So if they have won any kind of a battle, so they used to imply that as well. Now, common people also recorded what all they did. All right. Now, moving on. Here is the term archaeologist and historian. So, do you know who are archaeologists and historians basically? So, archaeologists are the ones who are studying the objects which were made in the earlier times, which were made in the past. Okay, so they are studying. So those who are studying these objects that were made in the past and used in the past, they are called as archaeologists. Whereas historians, that is scholars, they also study the past, but they are using the source of the information that are being found from the written information, okay, from the manuscript or the inscription, as we have seen just in the previous slide. So these are the historians. So these two have a very important role in our society, and from these people, they are the one who are contributing to know, to help us better understand about our past, okay, or in general the past. All right. So they study the remain of the building. They study that the buildings were made of stone or bricks. Okay. Today we see buildings are made of bricks or various materials are being used. So in earlier times, what kind of material people used to use? So they study that as well. They study the kind of paintings. They study the sculptures. They explore and dig under the surface of the earth to find what kind of tools people used to use, weapons, the pots, the pans, the ornaments, and the coins, everything. And they also look for bones of animals because we know that people were hunting animals back then. So they look for bones of animals, the birds, and the fish, so that they can know what people ate in the past. All right. So these historians and archaeologists are very much like detectives because they are helping us to know about our past. All right, moving ahead. So the question arises: do we have one past or do we have many? All right. So the very simple answer is since since past is different because there are different people, so obviously past is going to be different. All right, because if we are talking about that there were hunters, if we are talking about there were gatherers, if we are talking about there are travelers, there are the kings, there are the common people. So obviously all these peoples are different from one another, so the past is also different from one. So the answer is, of course, there are many paths because the lives of farmers and hunters are different from those of the kings and the queens, and the lives of merchants are different from those of the craftsperson, and so on. Example, if I want to convey today example, let's check. Okay, people there we know we have Andaman Island, and in Andaman Island, if you want to if you know that there are people who are getting their own food by doing it to themselves. They are fishing, they are hunting, and they are collecting just like the previous people. There are still people who are living their lives in that path. Whereas if you see people living in the cities, they're completely different. They are not getting food by themselves. They are depending on others for supplies of the food. Okay, for the supplies of food. So there are differences that are existing today as well and as well as in the past. Today we can see if you would differentiate the lifestyle of the rural people and the urban people, again it is going to be very different. The eating habits and the overall lifestyle also would be very different. The person who is living in the cities or in the rural area. Okay. So can we say that we know it all and we know it all and everything about the past? No, there are many things which are yet to be known. All right, moving on. If you would read history book, you would come across certain, you know, certain terminologies that you should know. There are certain words like BC, AD, CE, ECE, okay, so BP. So all these words just know it for one and remember. So BC stands for before Christ, all right, and AD stands for Anno Domini. From the very word itself, you can understand before Christ is something that has happened before Lord Christ was born, or before he was here in this world. All right, and Anno Domini is something in which the time in which, or the year of the Lord. Okay, that is the Christ, or everything that happened after. For example, today is 2022. Okay, so it can be written as AD 22, 2022 as well. And sometimes CE is also used, common era. Okay, instead of AD, CE is also used. And instead of BC, that is before Christ, BCE is also used. So CE is common era and BC is before common. Okay, so we use these terms because the Christian era is now used in most countries of the world. In India, we began using this form of dating about 200 years ago, because when Britishers came into India, the whole education system was introduced by them, and since they were using this particular kind of to differentiate the dates from one another, they were using BC, that is before Christ, or Anno Domini. India, we also started using it. Okay, and sometimes the letters BP, meaning before present, are also used. All right. And here I have attached one or some of the important dates that were mentioned in the NCERT. Just remember all of these. Okay. So the very first time agriculture began was 8,000 years ago. You must know that what was the year. So 8,000 years ago, the beginning of agriculture took place, and the very first city on the Indus began 4,700 years ago, and cities in the Ganga Valley, a big kingdom in Magad that is existed in 25 years ago. And if you remember, it was in the southern region. The present about 2000 AD or CE. So, for example, 2022, we can use AD as well, Anno Domini, and CE, that is common. All right, moving ahead. Now, here, decipherment. So we have seen that inscriptions were there, manuscripts were there, and in on the inscription there were so many things that were being inscribed. And these we have the evidences of various of the inscription that has been inscribed several hundreds of years ago. And these inscriptions have contain both scripts. So there are scripts and there are languages. So the kind of languages that were used and the scripts that were being used thousands of years ago or hundreds of years ago have changed over the period of time. It has not remained the same. Today, do we do we have our script called Prakrit? No. Today we are speaking in Hindi and not purely Hindi. All right. So that is what I'm trying to say, that the scripts and languages have changed over the period of time. All right. So, if they have changed, so how do scholars or the historians understand that what was inscribed back then? All right. So that is what we called as decipher. So we decipher, kind of we decode. Okay. So there is something of a mystery. There is something kind of a puzzle, and you are trying to decode. You are trying to decipher it. Okay. And one of the most famous stories of decipherment comes from Egypt. Okay, you know where is Egypt is? It is a country that is in North Africa. And 5,000 years ago, there were rulers, there were kings and queens. So there was a town near the north coast of Egypt, that is Rosetta. And on a stone, an inscription was found. And and this inscription contained three different languages and scripts. Okay, there were three different languages and a script was there. So there was Greek and there were two forms of Egyptian. So scholars actually what they could figure out was that they could read the Greek part. Okay, and they figure out the name of the kings and the queens that were enclosed there in. Okay, and they then placed the Greek and the Egyptian signs side by side. Okay, so they decoded very easily the Greek part, and now they put side by side the Greek and the Egyptian part, and they identified what? They identified the sound for which the Egyptian letters stood. For example, look into the picture. Here, L stood for lion, all right, and and a bird stood for A. A stood for for example, L, the letter L signified lion. Okay, it denoted lion, and the letter A denoted bird. Okay, and in this manner, once they knew all the letters, what all they denoted or what all they stood for, they read all the inscriptions as well. All right. So this is how they did the decipher. But however, in India, there is still um, certain scripts or languages which are still there are certain inscriptions which are still or yet to be deciphered. Okay, it has not been deciphered yet. All right. So I'm just going to end this entire chapter and leave you with food for thought. Okay, do locate in the maps and let me know in the comment section down below. So here is a quote by Harry S. Truman, and he says that the only thing new in the world is the history you don't know. Okay, so do know about history. History is very interesting. History is not boring at all, and if you would come to know about history, obviously you are going to know lots and lots of new things. Okay, so don't let yourself be in the dark of not knowing the history. All right, so thank you.